Praise the Lord and welcome to this explainer. Today, we are unpacking an incredibly tense, deeply personal family drama found right in the text of Genesis 37. This isn't just some dry, ancient historical record. It's a really raw, emotional look into human nature, jealousy, and the real-world consequences of favoritism. We're going to break down exactly how a family can completely unravel, step by step. So get comfortable because we have a ton of fascinating ground to cover today.
Just listen to the sarcastic, venomous intensity of this phrase for a second. Here comes that dreamer. What we're actually looking at in Genesis 37 reads way less like history and far more like a shocking true crime story about a deeply, deeply dysfunctional family. We are talking about a narrative of betrayal, elaborate cover-ups, and sibling rivalry taken to the absolute extreme. Okay, let's dive into this text and set our scene. The events take place over in the land of Canaan. We're introduced to a 17-year-old young man named Joseph. He was out tending flocks with his brothers, specifically the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, who were his father's wives. And right out of the gate, we see the spark that really lights this powder keg. Joseph brought their father Jacob a bad report about them. He was, well, for lack of a better word, he was snitching on his older brothers.
Now, the text reveals this extreme inequity in the household. You see, Israel, which is Jacob, loved Joseph more than any of his other sons simply because he was born in his old age. He even made him this highly visible, ornate robe. To put that into perspective, think of it with this everyday analogy. It's exactly like a modern parent buying their youngest, favorite teenager a brand new luxury sports car just for existing, while all the older siblings are forced to share a broken-down minivan to commute to their grueling, manual labor jobs out near Shechem. The text plainly states that when his brothers saw this obvious favoritism, they hated him. They absolutely despised him to the point where they couldn't even speak a kind word to him. And into this intensely hostile environment, Joseph actually decides to share his dreams. In the first dream, he tells them they're all binding sheaves of grain out in the field, and his sheaf stands upright, while his brothers' sheaves gather around and literally bow down to it. Then, in the second dream, the sun, the moon, and 11 stars bow down to him. While his brothers furiously ask him, "Do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us?" They hated him all the more. Even his father rebuked him, asking if he, Joseph's mother, and his brothers would actually bow down to the ground before him. But importantly, while the brothers are just boiling over with jealousy, the text notes that his father secretly kept the matter in mind. Moving on to part 1, the plot at Dothan, the breaking point. So Jacob sends Joseph from the Valley of Hebron to go check on his brother's flocks. By the time Joseph tracks them down in Dothan, the terrifying reality of this family dynamic, which is essentially a toxic workplace environment at this point, completely boils over. The brothers see Joseph approaching in the distance, and before he even reaches them, they immediately conspire to kill him. Their brilliant plan? Throw him into a cistern and just tell their father a ferocious animal devoured him. They coldly state, "Then we'll see what comes of his dreams." But then, we get this really brief moment of intervention. Reuben, the oldest brother, hears the murder plot and tries to de-escalate the whole thing. He says, "Let's not take his life. Don't shed any blood. Throw him into this cistern here in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand on him." You see, Reuben actually had a secret plan. He fully intended to rescue Joseph later and return him safely to their father. Which brings us to part 2, sold for silver, the cold calculation. So Joseph's life is temporarily spared, but look at this rapid, brutal sequence of betrayal. As soon as Joseph arrives, they brutally strip him of his ornate robe, that glaring, everyday symbol of their father's favoritism. They throw him straight into the empty, waterless cistern. Then, in an incredibly callous move, they actually sit down to eat a meal right there. And while they're eating, they spot a caravan of Ishmaelites, also referred to as Midianite merchants, coming from Gilead. They're loaded with spices, balm, and myrrh, heading down to Egypt. And this is where Judah chillingly suggests, "What will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood." And this number right here brilliantly illustrates the horrific reality of what happened next. 20. They pulled Joseph out of that cistern and sold him for just 20 shekels of silver. That is roughly 8 ounces of silver. That is exactly how cheaply these men valued their own brother's life. It's just wild. Now for part 3, a father's devastating grief, the tragic aftermath. So Reuben, who had actually been absent during the sale, returns to the cistern,
finds it completely empty, and he just tears his clothes in absolute despair, crying out, "The boy isn't there. Where can I turn now?" Well, with Joseph gone, the remaining brothers must now execute a horrific cover-up. They casually slaughter a goat, take that famous ornate robe, and dip it right in the blood. Then they take the blood-soaked garment back to their father and with devastating cruelty simply ask him to examine it to see if it belongs to his son. Jacob's reaction is absolutely heart-wrenching. He instantly recognizes it and cries out, "Some ferocious animal has devoured him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces." Jacob tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and wept for his son for many, many days. The text actually tells us that all his sons and daughters came to comfort him, but he completely refused their comfort, declaring, "No, I will continue to mourn until I join my son in the grave." But this text ends with a massive piece of dramatic irony. While Jacob is completely destroyed by grief, firmly believing his son is dead, Joseph is actually still alive. The merchants have taken him down to Egypt, where he is sold as a slave to Potiphar, who happens to be one of Pharaoh's officials and the captain of the guard. Finally, Part 4, 3 Steps for Daily Life, Lessons from a Broken Family. So, what does this ancient tragedy actually mean for us today? Well, here are 3 actionable steps drawn directly from the text that you can apply right now. First, recognize the dangers of overt favoritism. Just like Jacob's obvious preference in that ornate robe created deep fractures, playing favorites in a family or a workplace always builds resentment. Second, de-escalate jealousy before it becomes toxic. The brothers let their hatred simmer until they literally couldn't speak a kind word to Joseph, culminating in actual violence. When you see jealousy brewing, you've got to address it. And third, understand the devastating ripple effects of deception. The brothers' lie about the ferocious animal caused their father a never-ending, agonizing grief that completely broke their home. So, I leave you with this final provocative thought based on what we've learned today. What destructive dynamics are quietly brewing in your own family or workplace? Like, share, and subscribe.